Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. My name's Phil. Joining me as usual, I've got Rohan with me. Hello.
Hey.
And we've got another Canadian joining us today. It's Luke. Hey, Luke.
Hi guys.
This episode is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabu Casa. Easily access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that supports the Home Assistant and ESP home projects. Configuration is done by the user interface, so there's no fiddling with router settings, SSL certs, or any other YAML.
Whereabouts in Canada are you from?
I'm based in Kingston, Ontario.
Nice.
Not too far. I think you are probably the closest proximity person we've had on the show yet. We've had a few Aussies, so Phil's always like, "Oh yeah, you know, I'm here, I'm there." I never get to have that conversation.
It's awesome. You should get a badge, right?
That's right. You deserve one, Luke.
That's funny. All right, so Luke, you reached out to us on the email, and you basically gave us I like your short summary. It was a very long paragraph of your home, your home assistant setup. So yeah, we're here to pick your brains about it. So why don't you give us a little introduction about yourself, how you came into the home automation space, and what led you to Home Assistant?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, sure. So I worked, my background is in IT. I worked doing that for quite a few years. When we moved to Kingston, we bought a house. It was like first time. We first time homeowners, and I was like super excited.
Yeah. But
home automation was still pretty, I don't know, I would say it was in the early stages. I mean, there's people that have been doing it for years and years, but for me, it was still like, So I got a smart thermostat. I got the Nest thermostat, and that was like super fancy.
Yeah.
And I could control it with my phone, and you just felt like a god when you could like control the temperature when you're coming back from vacation. You can heat it up in the wintertime and things like that. So it was pretty minimal at first. I had a couple of smart switches to like turn the Christmas tree on and off, and like that kind of stuff. But then when we moved, we bought a new house, and it was a blank slate, and I was really sick of, we had a young family at this point. We had 2 kids, and I was sick of running around the house, turning off all the lights all the time. It was just driving me nuts. And this was a bigger house. So I'm like, okay, if we're getting a bigger house, we've got to do something to do it. So that the main driver of going to the smart space at all was just, I want to, when I leave the house, just, say, hey, whoever, turn off all the lights, or, hit a button on my phone or whatever it is that just cuts everything off. I don't have to worry about it, and it saves me a whole bunch of time running around. The next stage of that was, we've got young kids. It'd be nice to have a security system so that, I know that they're not leaving the house in the middle of the night by accident, like sleepwalking or something, because we've, you hear weird stories of that kind of stuff happening, and I'm like,
sure.
Oh gosh,
Or the window getting opened up, and, like all those horror, real crime stories you hear about. You're like, that's not happening here. Right?
Yeah. And there was one time where we woke up in the middle in the morning, and my daughter had gotten up, and for some reason she thought it was a good idea to go out and play in the car in the morning. And I'm like running all over the house, and I can't find her, and I'm like, deep breathing, trying not to panic. And I like walk through the garage, don't see her. I'm checking the backyard. As I'm walking back through the garage, I see her just like sitting in the front seat playing with her doll. I'm like, oh my God. She was like, I think 3 at the time or something. She's just like,
oh wow. Yeah.
So, there was lots of things. I'm like, okay, I'm going with the security system. I went with Ring because it has the integration with the local fire department, so they can, get notified if there's a fire or whatever.
Interesting. Is that like an actual integration from Ring itself, or is that something that you've done through Home Assistant and customized? Or
so that is Ring itself.
Right.
They've got part of their Pro plan in Canada and the US. I'm not sure if they do it other places or not, but they will. If you have the certified smoke detectors connected to the Ring hub, then because they have a Z-Wave radio in the Ring hub, at least the original one that I have.
Right.
I think it was Gen 2, because there was like an older Ring, and then there was a newer one, and then there's an even newer one now. I don't know. It's hard to keep track of it all. But the one that I had, it supported Z-Wave, which was like, oh, cool. It supports Z-Wave. I could get all these Z-Wave switches and have, you know, the fire and smoke, their combo smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. So, you know, you got a few of those, and those were like, you couldn't buy them in Canada officially. So I ended up getting them off of like Amazon from some seller in the US who like shipped them here, because like they were certified to work in Canada. You just couldn't buy them anywhere.
Yeah,
it was really weird. So I got a bunch of those, and they've been great. We only had one. I've had one false alarm, and that was during the renovation when, you know, contractor was like burning a hole in something, and
hey, at least they found their work, right?
Yeah, I found it worked. I get the call from the Ring people before they call the fire department. They're like, hey, so, you know, what's your safe word? You give them like a number or something, like a passcode,
right,
so that you can cancel it if you need to. It works the same way for the burglary and that kind of stuff.
Interesting that you have to supply a password for a fire call. You would have thought, like, security, I can see, right?
Well,
you know.
it's the opposite. So it's like, if you don't want, you know, I don't know if they asked for the fire, but they will if you like hit the panic button.
Yeah, of course, right.
Accidentally set off your alarm. They'll check and be like, hey, are you sure you're you?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Police coming.
As they should, right? Otherwise, somebody breaks into your house and they're like, yeah, I'm totally Luke. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
The last thing I want to do is be like running around trying to find water, and Ring's calling me like, hey, we're about to call a fire department for you, but what's your password?
What's that random phrase that you gave us like ages ago?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we got all that set up, and it was fine, but the Z-Wave integration with lights was just, it seemed like it was just totally an afterthought, and like it's technically still there. Like you can add Z-Wave lights to it if they're, you know, on the supported list of devices or whatever. And it's just, there's no good way through the Ring app to control the lights. It's like you have to like click through 7 menus and then find the light you want to turn on and off, and then you can turn it on and off. There's no like global controls. You couldn't make routines. You couldn't do anything like to group them or anything. It was just like, it was shocking how bad it was. And I think there just wasn't enough uptake that nobody bothered to.
Yeah, like maybe it was like a half-baked idea, right? Oh, it would be good to, you know, go into a full-fledged home automation hub sort of thing. And I guess, you know, then Amazon comes along with the Echo, buys out Ring, and, you know, now they've got Zigbee inside the Ring, in the Echo devices. And
yeah, I'm sure it was like, you know, the engineers probably, when they were adding the functionality for like the smoke alarms and stuff, they probably thought, oh, well, we might as well add lights. And then Ring came out with their own lighting platform right, for like all of the exterior stuff. And so I think they just never bothered to develop it any further. And it's been pretty stale since then. So at that point, I was like, okay, this is awful. I have to do something else. And my dad had an old, wasn't old at that point, but he just wasn't using it. It was a Wink 2 hub, which he was like, yeah, it's just collecting dust. I'll mail it to you. So it shows up, plug it in, get everything moved over to that. And, you know, I don't know, there was like 40 switches in this house or something. So, you know, it takes some time when you have to migrate stuff, but once it's on there, it's phenomenal.
Nice.
And it was working. Got everything, you know, a few of the different platforms. At this point, we had an Ecobee at the new house instead of the Nest. Because I was like, hey, Ecobee, it's a Canadian company. I want to support a Canadian company.
Yeah.
Awesome. And that's been great. We also got a new washer and dryer. Added a few, you know, I was adding a couple of motion sensors and some other stuff. And I was finding that the Wink was slow on a lot of the routines that you'd create for it, and like some of those things. And it had a lot of kludgy ways of getting things to work where you'd have to like use if this then that piped into it.
Then you got to like cloud dependency, and then you got to wait for the cloud to respond, and
you'd have like you was kind of like multiple layers of cloud dependencies, which is just like
slower by the time this cloud talks to that cloud, talks to this cloud, back to you and back to that.
Yeah, exactly. And just the logic that you could create was really rudimentary in a lot of their things. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I need something better. So at this point, I'm looking into all of the other options that are like not off the shelf, basically. So there's, we're looking at like Habitat and some of those other ones that I can't even remember anymore. Eventually I found Home Assistant. I'm like, oh, okay, this looks good. This looks really good. So I picked up a USB stick and I installed it on my NAS unit. I'm a photographer, and so I have a big NAS array for doing, storing all the photos that I do.
Editing and like a whole bunch of that, because photos are small, right? Especially when you're professional.
Yeah, it adds up really fast.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. And now I've started shooting video and stuff, and it's even worse. So, so I was able to do a supervised Docker container, which at the time seemed easiest. There's a weird conflict on the Synology where you can't have the VM running and some other service running at the same time. So I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to run it in a VM right now. I'll do, the Docker seemed easier. And it worked fantastically for, I don't know, the better part of a year, I think. I'm trying to remember when I think it was early 2021 that I switched over to, I migrated it to the VM version of Home Assistant. And then, as soon as you get into the Home Assistant world, it's like just this Pandora's box, right? Suddenly, all of the smart systems that I had would work with each other. And it was just like amazing. And
it unlocks a new level, right? Like you're like, oh, wow. Like now I can do crazy things. Like if I turn the thermostat to this level, this does that over there, right?
It's almost overwhelming a little bit at first, because you're just like, oh my gosh, I could do anything, you feel like you've got way too much power, and it's, it was not too long after that the house, the smart system got nicknamed the ghost house by my wife.
Of course, because all the gremlins in the house.
Exactly. All the code and little routines that we hadn't, nailed down exactly right.
Yep. Absolutely.
And like a case in point, like two nights ago, she works at the hospital. She delivers babies occasionally, and so she's like out in the middle of the night, comes back. I've got a routine that it checks to see if you entering the geo zone, and then it looks for motion on the cameras, and it'll unlock the door for you. Well, there's some delays in that system, and for whatever reason, she comes in, unlocks the door, and it still hasn't registered all of the bits in that routine. And so then she locks the door, and then it unlocks it for her.
Oh,
and then she locks it again, and then it unlocks it again. She went back and forth with it 3 or 4 times, I guess.
Trying to unlock the door.
Yeah, and so I had it set up in Node-RED, and I was trying to figure out what is going on here, because it's really simple. It's like it looks if you're in the zone, and then it checks to see if there's motion for 2 minutes on the Ring cameras, basically.
Yep.
And then triggers the unlock if it detects something. And so I'm not sure why it would repeatedly keep sending the unlock command. And I'm wondering if it's just part of the Z-Wave thing where it's like, oh, the command is sent and I didn't get the I've finished locking, unlocking command. And so it was just confused. So now I added a catch where it's like, okay, if it's been locked within, the last 2 minutes, just stop. Don't do anything.
But it's only by these sort of quirks that you'll find these edge cases, right?
It's the edge cases are crazy.
Yeah.
And especially we've got 3 kids now. We've got a 4th on the way. So the kids keep finding all sorts of things. They're like, hey, you've got a button that can open the garage door. I want to push it every time now.
Yeah. Just sit there and just keep smacking the button.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely it's an interesting balance always between the family acceptance factor and the trustworthiness of the children, and the things you actually want to accomplish with all of it. And it's been a lot of fun for sure.
What are some of the things you've had to account for with the kids? I mean, I know you kind of jokingly used the garage door button as an example, but like what kind of stuff and kind of how did you overcome those? I
mean, part of it is just like they're shorter, and so like some of the motion things don't work quite as well if depending on how you have your sensors in the rooms, or they'll just sit still for long periods of time, and then that could trigger lights turning off, right? Like if somebody's just reading a book on the couch for like an hour, it's like, oh, and then the lights are off.
That's funny. Yeah.
But the other thing is like they're just not. We've avoided the voice assistants in our house so far, just because it's just kind of a Pandora's box, like a barrel of stuff we just don't want to get into, like the kids, sitting there asking, Google or whoever to do all sorts of things or tell them the facts about all sorts of random stuff. Then like,
or make fart sounds,
Exactly. Yeah. Like it could be just silly fun, or it could be like, what's the, what was the Holocaust? And you're like, it starts rattling off this whole thing to them. And you're like, oh, okay.
Now we're
not that you don't want them to know that, but you want to have a filter on that a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Well, it takes is them just learning that keyword, right? Is that trigger word. And
and so like, especially my wife's just like, I don't want the, we have in our living room is where the Ecobee thermostat is, and it's like their fancy, smart thermostat, and it has the Amazon lady built into it. So it'll, have all those functions if you want it to, but it's just muted all the time. And we've forgotten, like for a while I was using it to play music and stuff, but now we just sort of like it collects dust. It does the thermostat thing, and that's it. Unfortunately, but like at one point I figured out how to do the you can like send Alexa or the Amazon lady commands to voice to text stuff. So you could have it read out notifications or whatever. But the wife wasn't having it. She's like, no, I don't want to hear that. Chiming in the middle of things. It's bad enough that we have a smart stove that whenever it finishes preheating, it pops up a notification on the TV, because they're both Samsung products.
That's awesome.
It's such a swing and a miss. Again, like these companies come out with these smart products and you're like, cool, they're smart and they do all these things. The stove you don't get notifications about the timers. So if I set a timer on the stove, it has no that information is not passed to the app at all.
Lovely.
Wow.
That seems like a basic feature that
it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And then like, why do they pop up the notifications on the TV? Like when it finishes preheating, and like if you want to control it with your phone, you have to like push a button on it to say, I want to enable smart control.
Oh no.
So that it's like a security feature, I think, so that you can't just like burn somebody's house down remotely.
Yeah. That's come out of some like risk assessment in a corporate office somewhere, right?
For sure. So you have to, like, if you want to be able to control it, you have to remember to hit the button before you leave the house, which I've done. Like I've done a couple of times where like I'll go to leave the house and I'll hit the button because it's like a recipe where you have to like bake it at 400 for 10 minutes and then bring the temperature down, right? And so then you can like, as you're walking to the bus, you can like turn down the temperature, right?
Sure.
Which is pretty cool.
Hey, Rohan, like Peter from New Zealand, like ex-BMC nut who automated his coffee machine, his Breville coffee machine. He's listening to this episode right now. And he's
100%.
like, I need that stove and I'm going to go in and hack those buttons to do it automatically for me, right?
That's right.
I'm like only a few months away from just ripping it apart and building a new control panel for it.
Yeah, it must be frustrating.
It's got like a touch interface, but it's like those kind of like faux touch buttons where it's like they're touch buttons, but they're not. And they're so bad. Like you have to touch it like sometimes like 7 or 8 times to get it to register a touch. And you're like, this shouldn't be this hard. Apparently, like I was watching some YouTube videos, you can like pull apart the ribbon cable and like clean it and plug it back in. Apparently that makes a big difference.
But why do I want to do that when I'm already paying so much for a stove that cleans it?
It's a nice oven. Like other than that, it's like a double oven, so it's got two sections.
Oh, those are nice. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's so close to being really great.
Yeah. Well, it's typical kind of like large companies trying to be like, hey, I've done this forever. The smart thing is kind of cool, so let me and again, and every large company does the same kind of thing, right? And there's no conversation between the smart things arm of this and of Samsung and the rest of it. They've just been mandated to do something, right?
Yeah. There's definitely some that are better than others, and some that do improve over time, which is good to see. Like we've got a Mural smart frame and a Samsung The Frame. I got one of those. TV in the living room, and like that's awesome. Like it looks fantastic. We ran the cord like through the wall to the other side, so there's like just no cords.
Yeah.
And both of them are great for showing artwork and kids photos and that kind of stuff. And but the Mural definitely had way more in the way of software updates over its lifespan. And
I was going to say, how have you found the Mural? Because I'm I've seen it and it's maybe very curious.
It's been great if you're a big, if you like having your photos displayed places and being able to just, upload photos from your last trip and pop them up there. It's really nice. The kids really love it. I have it on I think it's a 1 hour rotation. And there is an integration, or there was, for Home Assistant. And I found that I wasn't needing to do much with it. And I hadn't really gone down the rabbit hole.
Because I'm thinking, even just having photos on rotation is cool enough. But then if you could have like Home Assistant take a screenshot of your dashboard, right, and then put it up. If there's an alert or something, or hey, it's bin night is tonight, put it up on the screen. That might be kind of cool too.
Yeah, and I think there's ways to do some of that, get into it a little bit deeper. But I think you'd have to it's very playlist based is kind of how they have it work. So you've got this sort of cloud storage area that they allocate for you, and then you upload your photos there, and then you send them to the device.
Interesting.
And it's a little bit of a strange system. Like they don't really store them on the device. It does, I think, have an SD card slot or something, so you can plug things in manually that way if you wanted to. But yeah, the Samsung one's even worse though. It's like, the only way, at least the last time I tried it, the only way to get photos onto it is with your phone. You can't use your computer to upload photos to it.
Yeah. And you have to, don't you have to use Smart Things app or something like that? Like it's so stupid. Yeah. Cause I had to do that with my Frame TV.
Yeah. And then the function on it for slideshows and stuff, like cycling through your own photos is just awful. Like there's threads on all their forums where like, how is this a thing? Like, how is it so bad? This is like your flagship product and you just can't do it.
Yeah.
So we just have that one static, and the kids will every once in a while change the photo to a different thing. And that's basically it's kind of crazy.
It's funny how far we've come, yet not.
Right. Yeah, some of them, you swear it's just the intern at the office got the task of writing the interface for some of these things, and then that was it.
And that's it. That's good enough, right? So keep it that way. You mentioned before, so you don't have any voice assistants. You're avoiding those. How are you driving Home Assistant? Is it just your phone? Have you got touch panels around the home, or how do other people interact with the smart home?
Yeah, it's mainly we drive it mainly with our phones, but we have the Z-Wave with the GE Jasco smart switches everywhere. You can see one. And they've got double tap functionality, and so that comes in really handy for lots of things. So in our master bedroom, it's like a dimmer switch, so it controls the main lights, but then we've got 2 bedside lamps, and so you double tap it up, turns on one lamp. I have a Node-RED thing that actually has a timer on it, so that if it detects another double tap within a certain amount of time, it turns on the other lamp, and then does the same thing for turning it off.
Right.
So a lot of the extra controls are done through the double tap functionality of a lot of the switches. So like in our kitchen, you can turn off all the lights by double tapping the switch down or double tapping the switch up. I've got not a lot. I've got a few smart things buttons kicking around. One's right in front of the kitchen sink, so you can turn the lights on and off really easily. It's funny because there's a switch like 3 feet to the left, but you have to take a step to use it.
Sure.
So it's like just that much better to have a button that you can just hit right there. Yeah, I joked about, because they're magnetic, I joked this one time I had it, like I was like chopping vegetables and I had the little smart things button stuck to the side of the knife as I'm chopping vegetables. But look, I can turn the lights on and off while I'm chopping.
That's funny. It's a party.
It's fun, and the kids think it's hilarious. When you do funny things like that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's either it just does its own thing, so it's all like automations and routines and stuff, and then. So like, our tracks our phones. We have the app on my wife's phone and my phone, so that, like there's certain things that only happen when I'm home, and there's certain things that happen when she's home. Like, the doorbell, if the doorbell's ring, goes, then it'll flash the lights in the office where I am.
Right.
But only when I'm home.
Yeah.
Sure.
And if she's home as well, then it doesn't do that, because she's like, why is they flashing? Cursing the ghost house yet again, right? Like, yeah, it's an ongoing thing. One of her favorite features is that she can, whenever she wants to, turn the lights on and off in whatever room I'm in, just to
just to
like, hey,
just to mess
I'm still
with
here.
you.
I'm still here. Yeah, exactly. I built a climbing wall for our kids downstairs during the pandemic, and made it all like super colorful with lots of like crazy geometric shapes and climbing holds and stuff.
Sure.
And I put a Z-Wave RGB controller on there, like one of the little Zeus ones.
Yeah.
And then I put like these arcade buttons on like a panel on the roof, or like the ceiling.
Yeah.
So they climb up and they have to like hang on these like bars, and then they can whack the arcade button, and that'll trigger a color pattern, or like one of the like cycling effects on the Zeus strip. So it'll be like, turn on rainbow mode or lightning mode or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of a fun little project that the kids really enjoy. They get to climb up there and whack the buttons as far as they want.
That's awesome. That's a really creative way of using it.
Yeah, that one was, a few of these things, like they've gotten easier now that the Z-Wave platform has matured a lot more on Home Assistant. Like, to start with, oh my gosh, it was really difficult. I had to, edit config files in the Z-Wave database to get certain devices to even just work at all. And
sure.
Now like everything just works. Like I'm using Z-Wave to MQTT right now, because it has a better control panel. It gives you more functionality that way than the kind of native integration does. But they're like using the same code base, so like technically they've got the same support for all these things. But doing things like setting custom values on switches and stuff like that, which you kind of have to do with the Jasco ones. Like, to get the double tap functionality, you have to tell the controller to listen for those commands, basically, and you have to do it per switch. So that it's kind of it's still kind of kludgy, but it's not really it's not Home Assistant's fault. That's just how Jasco made their switches work. They're before the like scene control kind of default stuff that a lot of the newer ones have. So the newer version of the Z-Wave platform, finally I was able to get we've got some old radiators that are converted into electric, like baseboard heating ones.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So there's a company in Quebec that takes these old steam radiators and they resurface them, and you can get them painted in all different colors or finished different ways.
Cool. It's
a really neat, like recycling kind of upcycling sort of thing. And so we have, I think, three or four of those in the house now. And they're just gorgeous, right? Like these nice
Yeah.
Beautiful old radiators that looked like the old steam radiators. And so those are hooked into baseboard heat, which was already piped through the whole house. It was kind of a weird, like the house had baseboard heat and then they upgraded to a forced air system, but they left all the wiring and everything in for the baseboard stuff. So when we were renovating, we converted a bunch of the circuits to use these new radiators that are much prettier. But we have Z-Wave control panels for those. And they've got little screens on them. And for years, it was like 2 years, I was like, I could display an exterior temperature on here. If only I can figure out how to send the right command. And it took... It's just like, it's this really weird, like manufacturer specific sort of like set of values. You just have to blast this like thing at the thermostat and then it'll be like, oh, that's the exterior temperature. Great. And in the previous versions of Z-Wave, it just wasn't really possible. Like they didn't have the right set of commands that you could send it. It was really, really silly. And so finally in the new version, I've been able to get it to work and it's just so awesome. So I've got a thermostat outside hooked up to an ESP that measures the temperature and humidity outside, and it passes that to the thermostats every, I don't even know, it's like 5 minutes or something like that. Mm-hmm. So we always know the exterior temperature now.
That's those little things, right, that make all the difference.
Yeah, it's amazing how, like years later, all these little things that you just, get used to not working, and then suddenly like an update comes and you're like, oh, it works. Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah. Are you doing any, I know you talked about radiators and such, but are you doing anything for like fireplaces or anything like that?
Yes. I recently got a, Broadlink. I think it's the RM4. And they're a little funny because there's like a couple of versions of it that have different frequencies enabled for different regions and stuff like that. Interesting. So this one did support my fireplace, which I had to double and triple and like quadruple check to make sure that I was getting the right one.
Yeah.
So we've got a Valor fireplace that's like, it was new when we did the renovation. So it's like a gas insert, and it has its own, little 433 megahertz little remote control thing for it. And so I have that plus, so the Broadlink controls the fireplace, but there's no feedback loop. So I got I think it's a Zigbee, I think it's an Aquara sensor. I'd have to double check. Yeah. It's a little, temperature humidity sensor. And I just basically stuck it to the back of the like shroud that goes around the fireplace. Yeah. So it gets hot, but it doesn't like melt it. Or at least it hasn't melted it yet.
Yeah, I was going to ask,
and then I created some, I think they're Booleans in Home Assistant, some like templates for, basically if the value of the temperature is between a certain value, then it means it's on. Or if it's over a certain value, it means the fireplace is on. I think I have it based on the Ecobee temperature. So if the thermostat, because it's in the same room, so if it's so many degrees above the Ecobee's temperature, then that means that the pilot light's on. Right. Because the fancy new fireplaces, after 5 days, will shut off the pilot light automatically. Wow. Which is,
you don't have to go underneath and like...
Yeah. It's all auto start now and stuff. Yeah. So then, that was a whole... Getting the Broadlink thing to work was a little bit tricky too, because you have to you hold the remote and have it listen and do all that through, I think it was through Node-RED is the way I was able to finally get it to work. And you have to copy the codes from the output of one of the things. And it's just all these steps to get it to work. But eventually I was able to get the codes to copy, because it's hard because the remote has, and I wasn't able to get one of the codes because there's a command for up flame and down flame, right? To increase and decrease it. But then there's also holding down, which just continually decreases it. And
it does a smooth transition as opposed
to... for whatever reason, I can't get it to do that. It wouldn't understand the hold command. So to get it to go up and down, I had to basically sit there and just tap the button and figure out how many taps it takes to turn off the fireplace and turn on the fireplace. Because then there's a difference between Like if you bring the fireplace, like the flame level down, at a certain point, it'll be at its lowest setting. And then the next time you hit it, it'll go to just the pilot light.
Yep.
But that's different than just hitting the off button, because the off button will just turn everything off altogether. So you had to consider all these different states that the fireplace can be in. And so then I made little buttons to control the different functions in the Lovelace, basically.
I'm guessing it's RF, so there's no two-way. So it's basically you're broadcasting out.
Yeah, so the only feedback you get is the delayed temperature change from the thing. So I don't have it. It's more of just a convenience thing. So like if I'm sitting on the couch and I'm like, oh, it's getting too warm in here, I'm going to turn the fireplace off. I can just hit it and not have to find the remote. So that's when it comes in the most handy. Theoretically, I could also do it in like the event of an emergency or something. If Home Assistant detected, oh, I'm on UPS power, then it could trigger that to come on or something like that.
Right.
Because I've got the NAS and modem and all the other stuff is on a UPS unit. So I still don't have one on one of my access points, so I might need to do that.
So
because then otherwise it can't talk to the Broadlink thing anyway.
So being on a UPS, are they hooked into Home Assistant so they know when the power goes out to then start shutting things down, or hey, the power's gone out, I need to take this action?
It doesn't happen often enough for me to have bothered with it. Because we're in town. I grew up out in the country, and so I would have definitely done it in that case. Because we would quite often have power go out for hours at a time. Yeah. And then I think the longest it's ever happened is maybe an hour or two. And usually it's when you're home and there's nothing really that you're too worried about. Sure. Like in our case, there's nothing that we're really too worried about, like dying and, freezing up or anything like that. It's, the houses are pretty well insulated. It takes a long time for it to get cold enough from kind of baseline. But yeah, it's definitely, there's all these things that you're like, oh, I could add an automation for that. It's just a matter of finding the time to do it, right? Yeah. These days I'm spending a lot of time with I've been getting into the ESP thing. So that was kind of new in the last, 3 or 4 months.
That's not the Pandora's box too.
Yeah. And it's very different, but I've been really impressed with how easy the ESP Home platform is. Like, it's so easy to get things working. They just work right away.
Yeah, it's super, super handy too, right? And it integrates right away. So
yeah, I've been impressed. So we've got we have chickens, backyard chickens.
Nice.
So I have one out there that measures the temperature and humidity inside their coop and inside just outside, basically in the chicken run area. And it also controls some supplemental lighting. So I've got some LED strips in the coop because over the winter, if they don't get enough light, then they don't lay eggs, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was kind of just a fun thing I think that was kind of like the first project that I did for them, for the ESP thing. And then now I just before we went on vacation, because we just went on a vacation, and my wife's we've got this epic garden in the backyard.
Okay.
And so she's been starting a bunch of plants to put out there once it gets to be the right weather for it. And she's like, oh no, we're going to be away for a week. What if the plants dry out and all my seedlings die? And I'm like, we can solve this. We've got technology. So I ordered a little kit that came with, I think it was like 4 moisture sensors and 4 pumps and a little relay card, and then basically just plug that into the ESP.
Oh, nice.
And stick the pumps in a bucket of water and run all the hoses to the different spots, and it worked really well. It was a little bit finicky getting the temperature or getting the moisture sensors to give the right values, and you kind of have to be you sort of have to do this trickery because they're analog devices. In the ESP, I'm using the Node MCUs, and they only have one analog input.
Yeah.
But I found somebody online had put this awesome little bit of code where you basically have each of them have their own data pin, but then they all share the same analog pin. And what you do is you just check each one by itself. So like in like a cycle. So you start with one, you check the value, you close that, check the next one, and it basically does it like over time, so that like if it's still reading a funny value from the last one it was checking, it checks like 6 times and then gives a value to make sure it's got the like stabilized value for it. And it's worked really well. I was really impressed with that. So that was a cool little hacky way to get more analog inputs without having to actually have one.
Yeah, that's neat.
It's really cool.
We were thinking of doing the same thing, and then I was just like, you know what, we'll just wait, and then we'll do the seed length when we get back.
Yeah. I mean, it's stressful. It's like, the plant babies, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's so funny. It's like, we'll have years where it's like everything is amazing, and then we'll have years when there's just everything just sucks, right? So. Yeah. Last year we put in 16 gigantic raised garden beds. And wow.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's pandemic time, so like, what are we going to do? We're going to garden like crazy. And this year, I think she ordered, I don't even know, like 8 more garden beds. So I'm going to be really fit in about a month.
Yeah, just in time for summer.
Exactly.
Just Luke and his shovel. Yeah.
Oh man, it's so many yards of soil and dirt and logs and stuff, because last year we got like, they're like 36-inch high beds, so they're like super tall.
Yeah.
And so you have to fill them, right? They don't fill themselves.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so that's another thing, like eventually having some sort of an automated system for the garden gets a little bit more dicey when you try to put some of these devices outside to measure things. But it would be cool to have, be able to have like drip irrigation that feeds back into a controller that then can just water like certain zones of the garden and stuff like that. But we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Version 2 or 3 maybe.
I mean, even just a monitor. I know I stuck one of the, they're not, I don't think they're rated for it, but I stuck one of the Xiaomi Mi Flora sensors outside, and I mean, you're not too far from me, so you have a similar enough winter that I do, right? And I literally forgot about it for like 2 years, and I was like, oh yeah, let me change the battery and see if it still works. It still worked, right? And so I was like, okay, I was fairly impressed with kind of how that worked, and the seal had gone and everything, and it still kept working. So I was like, all right, cool.
That's very impressive. Yeah, we've got one kind of dumb wireless sensor that's outside that just feeds into the kitchen. I'm just always amazed at how long the batteries last. Like even through the winter, I'll just put rechargeable nickel metal hydride batteries in it, and it just takes like AAA batteries, and I think I change them like maybe twice a year. Like it's crazy. And compare that to a lot of the other smart devices, and they just destroy the batteries all the time.
Yeah.
Especially when they're misbehaving. I don't know why. Every once in a while, I find that some of the Ring devices will just decide that, oh, I'm going to be really chatty or something, and just the battery just goes. I don't. It's very strange. I've had it a couple of times where the batteries just continually drain, and I have to eventually just remove it from the Ring system and re-add it to get it to stop. Yeah, it was really, really bizarre. I had it a couple of times with there's one motion sensor that was in the garage, and it would just like constantly do that. So it might be a hardware issue, but it seems to not be doing it anymore. So I'm hopeful that it has fixed itself. But technically, I do have 2 Z-Wave networks in the same space, so they could be conflicting occasionally. I'm not sure exactly how much.
So you've got the Ring Z-Wave system and then your own home assistant system.
Yeah, so the Ring system talks to the smoke detectors, and it talks to the like motion detectors and the contact sensors.
I wonder if you can have the Ring set up as a secondary controller on your network, so that you could have just one Z-Wave network, and then you've got Home Assistant and Ring both as controllers, but the Ring is just a secondary one. I know some controllers like allow you to do that, because it's used for like migrating systems over to one another, so you don't have to repair everything. Well, that's the theory anyway. I don't know if it actually works in practice. Never tried it myself.
I would guess just as a guess, I would say that they've probably locked it out from that.
Yeah,
they wouldn't want to
People
be liable for issues that might arise from that.
But then Z-Wave is like pretty standards based, right? And maybe they had no option but to somehow enable it or not enable it officially. Like it's hidden there, maybe.
Yeah, because there are like all the same, like inclusion, exclusion stuff.
Yeah.
It's all buried in the advanced settings in there.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they probably just didn't add it to the interface or something like that.
Yeah.
Like on the
yeah.
app, right? They've done that a lot. Like, it's, again, all these companies with their devices. So the doorbell has a mechanical chime, and it's the like Ring Pro doorbell. And so it can ring the mechanical one or not. It's an option.
Yeah.
But that setting is buried like 6 layers deep in their menus to toggle that on and off. Yeah. And like, it should just be a, yes, I want it to ring the doorbell or not. It should be right at the top level. Because I would toggle that all the time. I'd love it if it was exposed to Home Assistant, and then I could have it toggle that on and off depending on like time of day and whether or not the kids are napping.
Exactly.
Like
right?
Yeah. So now I just have it disabled, and like I said, I have the office lights turn on and off to let me know that the doorbell's ringing.
Sure. Yeah. It's so funny. I personally I hate the Ring UI like on the app, and like it's not friendly at all.
Yeah, I avoid using it whenever I can. Yeah. The only time I use it is to go and review footage, basically. That's
same.
Pretty much it.
It's funny too, like we were talking about it a little bit earlier, where it's like we're saying that it is Z-Wave, it's a standard, it's whatever, right? But and it's funny because the whole distinction typically between Zigbee and Z-Wave is Zigbee is open, so it's also kind of open to interpretation. Right. Yeah. Whereas Z-Wave is a lot more like, hey, this is how it's going to be, and this is how we're going to license for you to use it. But then it still ends up being like, this is how you're going to use it. Kind of. Right. And it's
absolutely, and it's the same way with all these platforms. Like the Ring guys didn't, like. I was 100%, I was able to add all of my Z-Wave devices I had at the time to the Ring system. Worked great. I was able to add them. Was I able to control them in any useful ways? No. And it was the same way with like the Wink thing, where it's like, oh, I want to get this thing to control this thing, using this parameter. Sorry, you can't do that because we didn't program that in for you, And that's where Home Assistant just shines, right? Like, every time somebody would come over to like visit the house for the first like year and a half or whatever, somebody comes over to visit, and like I'm using some smart feature, and like, whoa, how'd you do that? And I'd go launch into this like, well, let me tell you about Home Assistant, right?
You're like the traveling salesman, right? But they've come to you, and you're like, yes, come.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and it was interesting. Yeah, like all these there'd be professionals like electricians and stuff that are that I had to get to sign off on some of the stuff where I installed all the Z-Wave switches and all the electrical stuff that we in the house, and you're allowed to do that in Ontario, but like it's frowned upon because they want professionals to do all this stuff. But like when they came to actually do it in our bathroom, because we had like a soaker tub with the like jets and stuff, so we had to have them come and like run new lines for that, and I just like, I don't want to mess around with the electrical panel myself right now. So we had them come and do it. But then when they're like in there hooking up things in the bathroom, they're like, so how do we hook up these switch? Because like this is a crazy new sort of switch, right? And so like I was telling them how to hook up the Z-Wave switch.
Yeah.
And that comes up a lot where people just there's no exposure to it.
Yeah, you would think that they would update the standards and stuff so that, because electricians, whoever, right, would need to deal with these kind of devices now, but builders.
It must still be like a pretty niche thing, I think. Like
it is, but I'm sure there's some demand for it, right?
Yeah, I get. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, there's definitely some demand for it, and there's like I think specialist companies that kind of deal in it exclusively, but your average, electrician who's, just come out of school, I doubt very much that they're teaching anything other than, if it's a smart switch, it's got to have a neutral, something like that, right? Like it's I think you'd have to take the initiative and go into it on your own. I doubt any of the institutions around here anyway are really teaching it in any capacity at this point. I mean, what would you teach? It's constantly evolving, right? By the time you came up with a curriculum, it's outdated.
Already out of date.
Yeah. And that's the biggest drawback to any of these systems. Even Home Assistant, like if you go away for 6 months and come back and you're like, oh, let me just update Home Assistant, and then just everything gets bricked.
It's like, all those like bloggers out there, YouTube videos, like if you were to go and see a YouTube video from 2 years ago on how to do something in Home Assistant, it's probably moved to the UI now, the YAML's different. Like,
like it might still work in the way that they described it, but you look for somebody might have a blueprint or something that's like, oh, this already does it. And it takes you 2 seconds versus, fuddling around in the YAML for like an hour.
Well, back then there was no blueprint either.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah. Like, I mean, I haven't used them extensively yet at all. Yeah. Just because it's like, it's something new. I have to learn something new. No, like.
Yeah. It's quickly becoming a technology old man, right? Well, back in my day when before blueprints and
blueprints are for you young whippersnappers. We don't need them. We go in raw, right? Like,
that's right.
Yeah, like as soon as a new update comes out, I'm like, cool. I will not be the canary. Thank you.
That's fine.
I'll wait for like 0.2 or 0.3 because by that point, like any of the like real major bugs, if there are like they're gone.
Yeah,
and like. I'm really happy having it on a VM now because it is super easy. I just like, snapshot, done.
Yep.
You just you do a snapshot, then you can do whatever you want to it. And I've had to a couple of times just roll back, and it's like, 10 minutes, cool.
And then you're back to where you were.
Yeah. It's much nicer.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got plans to do like some crazy Christmas light thing at some point.
Okay,
that's probably on hold for a little bit yet, but doing one of those, you drive around and tune into this radio station and watch the light display kind of thing. Like, it's gonna happen. Just
so you're gonna go to that level? Wow. Okay.
I think so.
Do you think Home Assistant will power it? Like you'll be able to?
I mean, it'll definitely be part of it. A lot of them use, I think, WLED, or there's a couple other programs that they typically use to control it. But I would definitely have the like start and stop buttons in Home Assistant for sure.
Yeah, of course.
Like just, even systems that don't really, like I don't really do much in Home Assistant with them. Like even just being able to monitor them there is nice. Just have one dashboard where like, I can see everything.
Yeah.
Like that's the best, part of it, really.
Yeah, you have a Christmas page essentially, right? And
like, I want to play this song, and you just like plug it in there.
Yeah. There's a guy that's on my street. Actually, there's two guys that are on my street that and both dads. Like it's the most dad thing. Like where they're both sitting there and they have competitions every Halloween and Christmas on who can essentially dress up their house the best and. It's just, and it got to the point where like this guy's got like oh my God, what's that Christmas movie? The one with the stupid leg lampshade thing. Oh my God.
I'm drawing a blank on it too.
But he's got essentially like a 10-foot version of that.
Oh,
and he's got like this giant coffin that he stores it in, right? Like,
wow.
and you go through all of this stuff, and you're just like, how much money have you spent on Christmas? But
it's not about the money; it's about the spirit.
But it's funny, right? It's totally the most dad thing that you'll see on my street.
I mean,
it's you just laugh.
Yeah, for me, I would want to do like the sort of permanent installation version where we're going to replace our roof at some point in the next, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like to tie it in with that where, we're replacing the roof. Let's, throw some stuff along all along the eaves everywhere and have it all tied in that way. And then it's, it's stealthy so that, it's not on all the time, but you can have it, it'd be really cool to just be like every holiday, right? Yeah. There's like some pattern of lights that pop up. It's all pink on Valentine's Day, green on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Stuff like that would be really fun. But it's basically just waiting on when we're going to do the other exterior renovation stuff. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That'd be a lot of fun. And the kids will get a kick out of that for sure. And then I won't have to climb up on the roof and hang lights all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the big selling point there.
Yeah. You install it once and then it's like done.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of LEDs across and it looks nice too, right? Like on your troughs and stuff. Like I think even during the year, even if it's just plain white and then you decorate that up, for Christmas and Halloween and whatever, Easter, Canada Day, whatever. Right. And
yeah, it's funny because like on one hand, I'm like, I look at some of our neighbors will have like up lighting on their house and like, all these pot lights that are just like on all the time. And I'm like, that's gross. I don't want that.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I'm like, I want LEDs everywhere.
Yeah. It's so like, true.
Yeah, it's definitely a little hypocritical there, but
yeah. But I mean, I think both, if done tastefully, can be really nice, right? Like
yeah. And like for me, it's just like, well, what are you lighting up?
Yeah.
Like on just a regular day, like you just want all the neighbors to see the side of your house. Okay. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I don't know. It just seems like light pollution. Like we've got exterior lights from like, we've got the floodlight cameras, the ring light, floodlight ones. And like they're great, but they turn off and then they turn, they turn off when they're done. And, and then it's not just like shining into my neighbor's window.
Face. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotta love that. Eh?
That's funny.
That's funny.
All right. Well, Luke, thank you so much for taking the time to tell us about your setup. You've definitely got some cool stuff happening. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks guys. It was a lot of fun. And I'm happy to, maybe inspire people or give them random ideas of crazy things they can do with their houses too.
Absolutely.
Scare their chickens with LED lights that turn on and
off. That's it.
Right.
Awesome. Funny. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Cheers. If you want to share your Home Assistant journey or come on as a guest, reach out to us at feedback@hasspodcast.io. That's HASS podcast.io.
The Home Assistant Podcast is hosted by Phil Hawthorne and myself, Rohan Karamandi. For links to topics we discussed today, check out our show notes on hasspodcast.io.